Rain battered the windows of the small house in the suburbs of Chicago as Melissa Walker huddled on the couch, arms wrapped around herself, trying to ward off the cold that came from both outside and within. The landline rang incessantly, each shrill sound a cruel reminder of the reality suffocating her. She already knew who it was: the hospital, with another bill, another warning about her mother's mounting medical debt. With tear-filled eyes, Melissa picked up the phone with trembling hands. "Ms. Walker, we're very sorry, but if payment for the hospitalization isn't made by Friday, we'll be forced to transfer your mother to another facility with fewer resources." Melissa's heart stopped. "Please, just a little more time. I promise I'll get the money. My mother can't be transferred. She needs the best care," she begged. But the voice on the other end only repeated the same cold words. She hung up, feeling drained. There was no more time. Her salary from the coffee shop where she worked wasn't enough to pay rent, let alone a hospital bill. The debts were piling up, and with each passing day, desperation grew like a relentless shadow. Melissa had an idea. Minutes later, she got off the bus and walked hurriedly along the wet sidewalk, cold drops mixing with the hot tears she tried to hide. Her heart pounded in her chest, her mind spinning in desperation. There was no more time. She couldn't lose her mother. Her last resort was one she never wanted to consider: her father. Taking a deep breath, she stopped in front of the massive mansion in the Gold Coast neighborhood, with its white columns and perfectly manicured garden. It looked like something out of a luxury magazine. A home that should have been hers but never was. Melissa hesitated before ringing the doorbell. She knew she wouldn't be welcomed here, but what else could she do? The door was opened by an impeccably dressed blonde woman wearing an elegant dress, and a look laden with disdain: Theresa Walker, her stepmother. "Well, well, look who's here," Theresa said, crossing her arms. "What is it, Melissa? Did you get lost on your way back to your world?" Melissa felt the bitter taste of humiliation, but maintained her composure. "I need to speak with my father." Theresa sighed and rolled her eyes but stepped aside to let her in. The entrance hall was luxurious, with an enormous chandelier hanging from the ceiling. The smell of fresh flowers and polished wood was a cruel contrast to Melissa's small house, where mold was already beginning to take over the walls. Her father, Victor Walker, was sitting in the living room reading a newspaper. Seeing her, his face lit up with a mixture of surprise and concern. "Melissa, what happened?" She pressed her lips together, feeling a knot in her throat. "Dad, I need a loan." Theresa, already elegantly seated on the sofa, let out a low, sarcastic laugh. "Oh, of course. I imagined you wouldn't come here just for a family visit." Melissa ignored her and turned back to her father. "I need $100,000. It's for my mother's treatment. The hospital wants to transfer her, and I don't have any more options." Victor looked visibly shaken. He had always loved Melissa, but never had the courage to go against Theresa. Now, he seemed about to say something when his wife cut him off. "Victor, this is absurd. $100,000 is a lot of money. You can't just go around distributing that kind of amount." Melissa felt her stomach turn. "Dad, please." Victor looked from Melissa to Theresa, clearly torn. He wanted to help, she knew that, but Theresa was the one who ran the house, and he'd never had the courage to stand up to her before. Before Victor could even think of giving an answer, footsteps echoed across the marble staircase. "What is my little bastard sister doing here?" The cutting voice came from Lauren Walker, Theresa and Victor's daughter, Melissa's half-sister. Lauren descended the last steps with an amused smile, her blonde hair falling perfectly over her shoulders. She wore an expensive dress and held the latest smartphone in her hands. Melissa took a deep breath. She'd always hated the way Lauren called her little bastard sister, as if she were a mistake, a burden no one wanted to carry. "Nothing much, darling." Theresa smiled at her daughter as if Melissa were a private spectacle for her entertainment. "She just came to ask for money." Lauren raised her eyebrows, surprised and amused. "Money? Wow, that's new. You never had the courage to come asking before." Melissa felt her face burn. "I'm not asking for charity, I just need a loan. I'll pay back every cent." Lauren exchanged a look with her mother, and then smiled in an almost cruel way. "Maybe I have a solution for you." Melissa looked at her suspiciously. "What solution?" Lauren walked slowly to the sofa and sat down next to her mother, crossing her legs as if she were about to announce something very important. Have you heard of the Montgomery family? Of course, they're billionaires. Exactly, Lauren played with a strand of hair, and I'm about to be forced to marry one of them. Melissa frowned, forced. Lauren made a dramatic face. Yes, my fiancé, whom I don't even know, Kyle Montgomery, is a failure, a bastard of the family. He's rebellious with no prestige, no power, nothing. He's involved in fights and illegal dealings. My engagement to him was arranged by our parents, but honestly, I deserve better. Melissa felt a shiver run down her spine. She didn't like where this conversation was going. What does this have to do with me? Lauren opened a bright smile. You and Kyle are the same, a bastard, perfect match. What? Theresa then intervened with her venomous voice. If you marry him in my place, Lauren and I will guarantee that Victor lends you the $100,000. Melissa felt the ground disappear from under her feet. This is absurd. Why would I marry a man I don't even know? Lauren rolled her eyes. Because, sweetie, it's your only option. I don't know him either. Do you want the money or not? Melissa felt her hands sweat. Everything inside her screamed to refuse. But then she thought of her mother, thought of the machines around her, the tubes, the possibility of losing her. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the pain crush her chest. When she opened them again, her voice came out almost as a whisper. If I marry him, will you really give me the money? Theresa and Lauren exchanged a complicit look before nodding at the same time. Every cent. Melissa took a deep breath. Fate was giving her a cruel choice, but deep down, she knew she had no choice at all. Her future had just been sealed. A few days later, the wedding venue was filled with curious and judgmental looks. The Montgomery family, always imposing, was accompanied by important guests, all anxious to witness the marriage of the family's rejected bastard. On one side, Theresa and Lauren watched with expressions of boredom and relief. On the other, Victor tried to hide his discomfort, but his worried gaze fell on his daughter, who sat in a chair at the altar, alone. Melissa gripped the bouquet tightly. The white dress was simple, hastily rented, but it highlighted her natural beauty. Her hands were sweating. Her heart beat so hard she could hear each pulse echoing in her ears. She had never imagined herself in this situation, marrying a man she didn't know, selling herself out of necessity. The church was silent. Murmurs began to spread among the guests. The groom wasn't there. Lauren smiled, leaning over to whisper to her mother. What a pathetic scene. Not even the broke bastard had the courage to show up to marry her. Theresa suppressed a smile and shook her head. I warned you this was a mistake. But who knows, maybe this is a blessing for her, better than being humiliated by his side. Melissa heard every word but remained firm. Her stomach was in knots. Every second that passed was another dose of humiliation. What if he didn't show up? The priest cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. We can wait a little longer, he said, not knowing what to do in the absence of the groom. Melissa closed her eyes for a moment. Everything inside her screamed to run away. But then she thought of her mother in the hospital, the money she needed. She took a deep breath and remained seated. This wedding had to happen because she needed that money. That's when the church doors burst open with a crash. Everyone turned at once, and then he entered. Kyle Montgomery. Lauren, who was already laughing at Melissa's humiliation, was speechless. The whispers ceased. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath. Melissa looked at him and felt her heart stop for a second. He was nothing like what she'd imagined. Tall, in a suit perfectly tailored to his body, dark brown hair slightly tousled as if he'd just stepped out of an expensive cologne commercial. His green eyes were intense, deep, but hid something behind them, a secret, a mystery. He walked confidently to the altar, unconcerned with the stares upon him. His presence dominated the room. Melissa swallowed hard. Lauren stared at him with wide eyes. This can't be possible, she murmured, unable to believe that the man she was almost forced to marry wasn't a wrinkled old man or a failure in torn clothes, but rather a devastatingly handsome man. Kyle stopped beside Melissa and looked directly at her. Sorry I'm late. His voice was deep, velvety, like a whisper that carried authority. Melissa couldn't respond, she just nodded. The priest resumed the ceremony. Each word seemed distant. Melissa was numb. She could only think about the man beside her. When the moment came, the priest looked at them both. "You may kiss the bride." Melissa's eyes widened. She hadn't expected this. But before she could process it, Kyle gently held her face and leaned in to kiss her. It was a quick kiss, but intense, a kiss that made the guests let out small murmurs. Melissa felt the warmth of his touch and was left without reaction. When he pulled away, she was still trying to understand what had just happened. Then his voice sounded low and intense in her ear. "Now let's go to my house. After all, you're my wife." Melissa shivered. Theresa and Lauren exchanged confused looks. They didn't know what to expect from then on, but Lauren was relieved. No matter how handsome Kyle was, he was still a failure of the Montgomery family. Now the burden was Melissa's. The limousine drove them away from the church, leaving behind the judgment of the guests. Melissa watched the city through the window, trying to ignore the presence of the man beside her. "You seem tense," Kyle said, breaking the silence. She turned to him. "What did you expect? I just married a stranger." He smiled sideways. "That makes both of us strangers then." The car stopped. Melissa looked out the window and saw a modest building, not a mansion, not a luxury apartment, just a simple but well-located place. Kyle got out and opened the door for her. She hesitated. "This is your house." He nodded. "Do you think it's bad?" Melissa looked around. It was a normal, simple building. When she entered the apartment, she was surprised. It wasn't luxurious, but it was cozy, warm tones, wooden furniture, comfortable sofas, different from the coldness of her father's house. "It's beautiful," she said sincerely. Kyle smiled sideways. "Good, because it'll be your home for the next 2 years." She stared at him. "And now, how will this work?" He crossed his arms and looked at her for a moment. "Out there, we'll be the perfect couple. In here, we live our separate lives. You get the bedroom, I'll sleep on the couch. We don't have to get involved, just appear happy to others." Melissa hesitated. Why do this? Why marry someone you don't know? He looked away for a moment, as if weighing his words. That doesn't matter right now, but it was necessary. Melissa narrowed her eyes. If I'm going to pretend to be your wife, I think I have the right to know. Kyle smiled, but there was something enigmatic in that smile. Let's just say there are things in my family that need to be resolved. Melissa felt a shiver. She didn't know exactly what she was getting into, but one thing was certain. Kyle Montgomery was not a simple failure. And somehow, she had just become a piece in a game much larger than she imagined. She took a deep breath, extended her hand to him, and smiled. Then I'll be a great wife until we decide what to do. Kyle looked at her for a few seconds. His gaze traced every detail of her face as if he were seeing her for the first time. You're more than I expected, he murmured. Melissa felt her cheeks flush. The game had begun, and neither of them knew what fate still had in store. The sun hadn't fully risen yet when Melissa got up from bed, her eyes heavy from a restless night. Her body was tired, but her mind was restless. That day, she would finally resolve the hospital debt problem, get the money from her father, and ensure her mother continued receiving the best care. She took a quick shower and dressed in something simple but presentable. She didn't want to look desperate, even though she was. She grabbed her purse and left the apartment quietly. Kyle was still sleeping on the couch, his arm thrown over his eyes, his chest rising and falling in a calm rhythm. For a moment, Melissa stood watching him. He seemed different when he slept, less enigmatic, almost vulnerable. But she didn't have time to analyze that. She left before he woke up. The journey to her father's house was long. Each step was accompanied by a mixture of anxiety and nervousness. She knew she wouldn't be well received, but the deal had been made. They had promised. When she arrived, she knocked on the door firmly. A few seconds later, Theresa opened it, wearing a silk robe and holding a steaming cup of coffee. The venomous smile appeared immediately. Well, Melissa, you're already back." Melissa kept her posture firm. "I came to get the money. Is my father here?" Before Theresa could respond, Lauren appeared at the top of the stairs, descending slowly as if savoring every second of that moment. "You really thought it would be that easy," Lauren said, laughing softly. Melissa felt a chill. Something was wrong. "What are you talking about? We made a deal. I fulfilled my part." Theresa sighed dramatically and took a sip of her coffee. Well, dear, there was an unforeseen circumstance. Melissa frowned. What kind of unforeseen circumstance? Lauren crossed her arms, clearly enjoying the situation. Let's just say we can no longer lend you the money, at least not now. Melissa's blood ran cold. What? But that wasn't part of the deal. Theresa shrugged. Life is full of surprises, my dear. You didn't really think we'd simply hand over that amount so easily, did you? Melissa felt rage rising in her chest. She had already expected their betrayal, but not so soon. This isn't a game. My mother needs that money now. Theresa let out a tired sigh. I'm sorry, but I can't help you, Melissa, not now. Melissa couldn't take it anymore. She pushed past the door and entered the house, walking straight past Theresa. Dad, she called, her voice echoing through the mansion. Victor appeared in the living room, his eyes wide when he saw her there. Melissa, what's happening? She walked up to him. You promised, I did what you wanted, now keep your word. Victor looked from Melissa to Theresa, clearly confused. What are you talking about? Theresa appeared beside him, holding his arm possessively. Victor, darling, we've already talked about this. We can't help right now. But I can. Theresa squeezed his arm, her eyes sharp as blades. We can't, dear. Melissa saw the exact moment her father hesitated, the fear in his eyes, the uncertainty, and then he lowered his head. I'll see what I can do. It was like a punch to the stomach. Melissa felt tears burning her eyes but didn't let them fall. I don't need to, I already know the answer. She turned and left, her heart heavy, her eyes stinging. When she reached the street, tears streamed down her face. She had sworn that day she would resolve everything, but now. She walked aimlessly for a few minutes, trying to pull herself together. When she realized she couldn't waste any more time, she decided to go to her old apartment to get her things. It was strange being there again, the small, cramped place that smelled of coffee and lonely memories. She packed her clothes, a few personal items, and separated some things she could sell. Every penny counted. She spent the rest of the day trying to find buyers for her items. She posted everything online and soon received a message from someone interested in buying one of her appliances. The buyer seemed rushed and insisted she deliver the product personally. Melissa, desperate, accepted. She took a taxi to the agreed location, an empty parking lot. She delivered the product and received a payment receipt on her phone, but when she tried to confirm the transfer at the bank, she realized the truth. It was fake. The money was never deposited. Panic took over her. No, it can't be. The buyer's phone was turned off. The contact had disappeared. Melissa sat on a nearby bench, her hands trembling, her face wet with tears. She had been scammed. The money she needed, that could help pay something at the hospital, was gone. Meanwhile, across the city, Kyle was in his makeshift office with his personal assistant, Marcus. Marcus crossed his arms, observing Kyle with curiosity. I still can't believe you're doing this. How do you plan to fake a simple life when you've spent your entire life surrounded by luxury? Kyle smiled sideways without looking away from the papers in front of him. It's temporary, until I get what I need. Marcus shook his head. And your wife? Kyle stopped for a moment, thinking of Melissa. She doesn't know anything, and it's better if she continues that way. On the way home, Kyle was driving calmly, but when he turned the corner of his apartment, something caught his attention. Melissa was sitting on a street bench, her shoulders hunched, her face hidden in her hands. He parked and approached. Melissa. She looked up, surprised to see him there. Kyle. He crouched down to her level. What happened? Tears returned to Melissa's eyes, but she quickly wiped them away, trying to appear strong. Nothing. I just went to my father's house to get money from a deal we made, but my stepmother and sister tricked me. And then? Her voice failed. I tried to sell some things, but I fell for a scam. Kyle observed her face attentively. He had never seen her so vulnerable. Melissa then took a deep breath and forced a smile. But it's okay, I'll make us a snack. She got up and walked toward the building, trying to compose herself. Kyle stood there for a moment, watching her. She was strong. Even after everything, she still tried to move forward. He followed her to the apartment, crossing his arms as he watched her move around the kitchen. Melissa seemed determined, but her eyes were still red. Kyle didn't understand why, but at that moment, something inside him changed. And for the first time, he realized how special Melissa was. The smell of warm bread and melted cheese spread through the small apartment as Melissa finished preparing the snack. She moved through the kitchen with natural delicacy, focused on what she was doing, even though her heart was still tight from the day's events. Kyle sat at the table, watching her in silence. Something about her intrigued him. She wasn't like the women he'd known throughout his life. Melissa didn't try to impress, didn't act with fakeness or hidden agendas. After everything that happened, she could still smile, even if inside she was destroyed. She placed the plates on the table and sat across from him. It's nothing fancy, but I think it turned out well. Kyle picked up a sandwich and took the first bite. The taste surprised him. It's great, he said sincerely. Melissa smiled, satisfied, and began to eat. For a few minutes, the silence between them was comfortable, until Melissa decided to break it. Tomorrow, I have some job interviews. I want to start working again. Kyle looked at her. Why, you don't need to, I can handle the bills. She shook her head. I don't want to depend on you. I know our marriage is an arrangement, and I don't want to feel like a burden. Besides, I need the money to resolve my situation with the hospital. Kyle leaned back in his chair. Hospital. Melissa hesitated for a moment but then sighed. I made a deal with my family. If I married you, my stepmother and sister would lend me $100,000 so my mother could continue to be hospitalized. Kyle said nothing, just kept listening. My mother needs continuous treatment. Without the money, she'll be transferred to a public hospital without adequate resources. When my stepmother and sister made that proposal, I knew it was wrong, but I had no choice. I accepted. But today? Her voice failed. Today they tricked me. They pretended they never made that deal and refused to help me. Kyle clenched his hand into a fist under the table. And your father? Melissa gave a humorless laugh. He never had the courage to choose me. Kyle didn't know what to say. He wasn't the type to show feelings, but something about Melissa's pain affected him. The next day, when Melissa left early for her interviews, Kyle picked up the phone and called Marcus. Find out which hospital Melissa's mother is in. I want all the information possible. Does this have anything to do with her or with your plan? Kyle didn't answer, he just hung up. Hours later, he stood at the entrance of a discreet but well-structured hospital. He walked down the hallway wearing a casual suit that contrasted with the sterile environment. A nurse directed him to a private room. He knocked softly before entering. Inside, a woman lay in bed, connected to various machines. Despite being weakened, her expression carried gentleness. Who are you? She asked weakly. Kyle took a deep breath before responding. My name is Kyle Montgomery. I'm Melissa's husband. The woman's eyes widened. Husband. He nodded and pulled up a chair, sitting beside her. I know this must be a surprise, but I came to ensure you won't be transferred. Melissa's mother was silent for a moment, evaluating the man in front of her. This was Melissa's idea, wasn't it? Getting married to try to save me. Kyle confirmed with a nod. She did this for you. The woman closed her eyes, breathing deeply. My daughter has always been willing to sacrifice everything for those she loves. Kyle lowered his gaze. I know, and that's why I'm going to ensure you have the best treatment possible. I don't want Melissa to worry about this. Melissa's mother analyzed him for a moment. You care about her. He hesitated. I'm starting to care more than I should. The woman smiled softly. Then take care of her. Melissa has already suffered too much in life. I promise, but before I leave, he made a request. Please don't tell Melissa about this yet. I need to resolve some things first. The woman nodded, still analyzing that mysterious man who somehow was already in love with her daughter. That night, Melissa came home smiling. I got a job. Kyle watched as she took off her shoes and put her purse on the table. An advertising agency hired me. It's not a big position, but it's a start. She was radiant. Now I can negotiate with the hospital and start paying off the debt. Plus, I can help with the household expenses. Kyle looked at her without knowing what to say. He had already resolved everything, but he didn't want to break that happiness of hers. This deserves a celebration. Melissa agreed. She grabbed a bottle of wine from the small improvised cellar in the corner of the kitchen and served 2 glasses. They sat on the couch, laughing at small stories and exchanging glances. The wine warmed the atmosphere, and the barriers between them began to disappear. Melissa, in a moment of courage, fueled by the alcohol and the lightness of the night, leaned toward him. Kyle realized she was going to kiss him. For an instant, he felt desire take over, but then he gently held her face and pulled back. Not like this. Melissa blinked, confused. He smiled slightly, his eyes scanning her face. I want it to be real. I want you to be sober when you decide to kiss me. She was silent, absorbing those words. Then, without saying anything, she nestled against his chest. Kyle ran his hand through her hair, feeling her relax until her body became completely limp. Melissa had fallen asleep in his lap. He stayed there, watching her, feeling something grow inside him that he still couldn't name, but he knew it was strong and dangerous. Because at that moment, he realized he was falling in love with Melissa Walker. And that could change everything. The morning light entered softly through the curtains, illuminating the small apartment with a golden glow. Melissa woke slowly, feeling her body heavy and her head slightly throbbing. The wine from the night before still left traces in her system. When she opened her eyes, she realized she was still on the couch, but she wasn't alone. Her head rested on Kyle's legs, who was sleeping sitting up, his hand still intertwined in her hair. Melissa's heart raced. Memories from the night before came flooding back, the laughter, the wine glasses, the closeness, and then the moment she tried to kiss him. Her skin burned with embarrassment. How could she have been so impulsive? But what unsettled her most was the fact that Kyle didn't kiss her. He could have taken advantage of the moment, but he didn't. Melissa closed her eyes, trying to calm the confusion inside her. Carefully, she got up so as not to wake him. She went to the bedroom, took a quick shower, and dressed in comfortable clothes. Her first day at work would start in a few hours, but before that, she needed to resolve something. She picked up the phone and dialed the hospital. The secretary transferred the call to the financial department. Melissa took a deep breath. Good morning. My name is Melissa Walker. I'd like to inquire about the debt related to my mother's hospitalization. I'm starting a new job and want to negotiate a payment plan. On the other end of the line, a brief silence. Ms. Walker, your debt has been paid off. There are no more outstanding financial obligations in your mother's name. The world seemed to stop for an instant. What? That can't be right. A few days ago, I was told I had a $100,000 balance. Yes, but the debt was paid in full. There is no pending amount. Melissa felt her hands tremble. Her first reaction was to think of her father. He must have paid it secretly. It was the only explanation. She quickly hung up and called his number. Victor's voice answered from the other end, low and careful, as if he didn't want to be heard by someone. Melissa, why are you calling? Did something happen? Dad, I know it was you. What did I do? You don't need to pretend. I found out the hospital debt was paid. I know Theresa wouldn't let you do this. You must have done it in secret. I just wanted to thank you. On the other end of the line, a strange silence. Then Victor sighed. Melissa, I didn't pay that debt. Her breath failed. What? But if it wasn't you then? Her heart raced. At that moment, Kyle entered the bedroom, already dressed, wearing dark jeans and a dress shirt rolled up at the forearms. He grabbed his car keys. I need to go out, work. Melissa was still holding the phone, staring at him, dazed. Sure. Kyle nodded and left through the door. Melissa stood there, staring at the emptiness, her heart tight. If it wasn't her father, then who had paid the debt? She got ready and left for her first day at work at the advertising agency. The morning was busy. Her new boss introduced her to the team and gave her some tasks. Melissa wanted to concentrate on what she was doing, but her mind was still turbulent. During the afternoon, she needed to research some references for a project and began browsing news and business websites. That's when something caught her attention, a report about the Montgomery family. She almost scrolled past, but a name made her freeze. Kyle Montgomery. Melissa clicked on the article, and then everything collapsed. Photos, more photos, millionaire businesses, luxury events. one of the heirs of the powerful Montgomery Corporation, involved in real estate and technology investments. Kyle was rich, not just rich, he was one of the most powerful men in the country. Melissa felt a knot in her throat. He had lied to her. That whole story about being a broke bastard was a farce. He made her believe he was in the same situation as her, when, in reality, he was above all of it. She closed the laptop forcefully. Her chest burned with anger and humiliation. She stayed there at work, but her head was elsewhere. When she finished her shift, she went home as quickly as possible. She began packing her things, grabbed her clothes, her belongings, and put them in a suitcase. She wouldn't stay there another second. The door opened. Kyle entered, taking off his jacket and loosening his tie. "You're leaving? I wanted to know how your first day at work went." Melissa turned around, her eyes shining with fury. "I know everything." He stopped, confused. "Everything? What do you mean?" "Your secrets, your lies. You made me believe you were a broke man, a rejected bastard. But in reality, you're a billionaire. You never needed this marriage, but I did. I sold myself out of necessity while you were just playing games." Kyle was silent for a moment, assessing the situation. Melissa continued, her voice trembling. "The worst part is that I'm falling in love with you. That scares me because I know I'm just a fool. How could I compete with all the women you could have? I'm nothing to you." Kyle took a step forward. "If I were playing with you, Melissa, I would have kissed you last night." She swallowed hard. "What? You wanted me, you tried to kiss me, but I didn't accept it because you were drunk. I could have had you right there, but I didn't want it to be that way. I want all of you, Melissa, but only if you want me to." She felt tears roll down. This is cruel. She took a step back, heading toward the door. But before she could leave, he grabbed her arm. She tried to resist, but Kyle was faster, and then he kissed her. It wasn't just any kiss. It was intense, loaded with everything they'd been holding inside: pain, desire, fear, love. Melissa tried to fight, tried to pull away, but he held her face delicately and whispered against her lips, "I want you, and I know you want me too." She sobbed softly. "Kyle." He pulled her closer, his eyes shining with emotion. "Stay with me, I'm completely in love with you." Melissa closed her eyes. What would she do now? The suitcase slipped from Melissa's hands and fell to the floor with a dull thud, but neither of them cared. Everything around them disappeared the moment she surrendered to Kyle's kiss. The tears still glistened in her eyes, but were replaced by the overwhelming warmth of his touch. Kyle pulled her closer, his hands holding her face as if she were the most precious thing he'd ever touched. Melissa felt her heart race, each beat echoing in her chest. The kiss was intense, full of emotion, desire, and silent promises. He kissed her as if she were the only woman in the world. She slid her hands through his hair, completely losing herself in the sensation. There were no more doubts, no more fear, just the two of them surrendered to each other. The night unfolded between whispers, caresses, and unspoken vows. They made love with passion and complicity, as if everything they'd lived through before had led them to that moment. As if every suffering, every tear, every fear had been necessary for them to find that instant of happiness. Melissa had never felt so protected, so desired, in Kyle's arms. She finally understood what it meant to be loved. The next morning, the smell of fresh coffee filled the room. Melissa slowly opened her eyes, feeling the soft sheet against her skin. When she turned, she found Kyle holding a tray with coffee, toast, and fruit. He smiled, sitting beside her on the bed. "Good morning, Mrs. Montgomery." She laughed softly, hiding her face in the sheets. "That's still strange. I'm not used to that last name yet." He placed the tray on her lap and caressed her hair. "You'll get used to it. I plan for you to carry it for the rest of your life." Melissa blushed and took a sip of coffee. "Why did you do all this, Kyle? Why did you lie to me?" He sighed and ran his hand through his hair. "When my family arranged this marriage, they told me I'd be marrying Lauren Walker. They said she was shallow, materialistic, and spoiled. I didn't want that for my life, so I decided to set up a plan. I showed up as a failure, hoping she'd back out." Melissa frowned, "But then, when I saw you, I knew I'd married the wrong woman." Kyle smiled, touching her face tenderly. "And for the first time in my life, I was happy about a mistake." Melissa lowered her eyes, feeling her heart melt. And the hospital debt. I went there, met your mother, told her about our marriage and that you did all this out of love for her. He paused. I also told her something else. She looked at him intently. What? That I was falling in love with you. Melissa smiled, moved. In the following days, their life changed completely. Kyle decided he didn't want to hide who he was anymore, so he took Melissa to live in his mansion. When they arrived, Melissa was speechless. The house was stunning, something out of a fairy tale. Each room was decorated with elegance, but it wasn't the luxury that impressed her. It was the fact that the place didn't feel cold because she was by Kyle's side. News of the real marriage and Kyle's wealth spread quickly, and soon the truth reached Melissa's family. Theresa and Lauren were in shock. This is a joke, Lauren said with a nervous smile. He can't be rich. He can't be a millionaire. They told me he was broke and problematic. But it was true. Driven by curiosity, Theresa and Lauren went to the mansion. Melissa, though anxious, allowed them to enter. She wanted to close that chapter once and for all. Lauren entered the living room as if inspecting the place, her eyes shining with greed. Theresa maintained her superior look but was clearly uncomfortable. When Kyle appeared, Lauren completely changed her expression. She walked up to him, touching his arm with a seductive smile. Kyle, I always knew there was something special about you. Melissa watched the scene with disgust. What do you want, Lauren? Lauren looked at her sister with a fake smile. Just to see my little sister. She looked at Kyle again and sighed. You know, Kyle, she never knew how to appreciate you, but I was always willing to go through with this marriage. I would have made you happy. Melissa felt her blood boil. Kyle, however, laughed with contempt. Really? Then why were you the one who wanted to switch places with Melissa? Lauren turned red. I didn't know what I was losing, but now I see that we're much more compatible together. If we're so compatible, you'd be in her place now, but you're not. Lauren huffed and crossed her arms. Oh, please, you can't be serious. You're going to waste your life with her. Kyle approached Melissa and held her hand firmly. Melissa is my wife, the only woman I want by my side. Theresa, realizing she'd get nothing there, grabbed her daughter's arm. Let's go. But Lauren didn't accept the rejection easily. In the following days, she sent messages to Melissa, saying Kyle was hers and demanding money to stay away from their lives, or else she'd keep trying to win him over. Melissa simply blocked her number. The financial situation of her old family began to crumble. The money Theresa had protected so much was mismanaged. Victor, torn between his wife and his conscience, tried to help, but the conflicts within the house increased. The fights became constant. Meanwhile, Melissa's mother was discharged. Kyle ensured she had a special room in the mansion with home care and everything she needed. Melissa saw her mother improve each day, and she realized that for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. And then came the biggest surprise of all. Melissa began to feel strange, morning nausea, fatigue, something was different. She went to the doctor, and when she received the results, tears streamed down her face. She was pregnant. When she told Kyle, he held her by the shoulders, his eyes shining with emotion. We're going to have a baby. She nodded, smiling. Kyle laughed, pulling her into his arms and spinning her in the air. I've never been so happy in my life. Melissa smiled against his chest. After so much suffering, so much fear, they had finally found their happy ending. And they knew that from then on, no matter what happened, they would always have each other. 2 years later, the Montgomery mansion was filled with laughter and joy. Little Emma Montgomery, with her mother's dark curls and her father's green eyes, ran through the garden chasing butterflies, while her grandmother watched from a comfortable chair on the terrace. Melissa's mother had fully recovered, living with them in a guest house on the property. She spent her days tending to a flower garden and spoiling her granddaughter. Victor had finally found the courage to leave Theresa after discovering she'd been embezzling from his business accounts. He'd rebuilt his relationship with Melissa slowly, proving through actions that he truly wanted to be a part of her life. Theresa and Lauren had faded into obscurity, their schemes and manipulations finally catching up with them. Last Melissa heard, they'd moved to another state, far from the life of luxury they once knew. Kyle had expanded his business empire, but what he valued most was coming home each evening to his wife and daughter. He'd learned that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in moments, bedtime stories, family dinners, and the sound of Melissa's laughter filling their home. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to True Revenge and hit the like button. Your support means everything to us. As Melissa watched Kyle chase Emma through the garden, both of them laughing, she couldn't help but smile. She thought back to that rainy day in Chicago when she'd stood at her father's door, desperate and broken. She never could have imagined that accepting that cruel arrangement would lead her here, to love, to family, to home. Kyle caught Emma and lifted her high in the air, her delighted squeals echoing across the lawn. He looked over at Melissa and winked, and in that simple gesture, she saw everything: their past, their present, and their future. She'd once sold herself out of desperation, thinking she was sacrificing her happiness, but instead she'd found it. And as the sun set over their home, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Melissa realized that sometimes the darkest moments lead us to our brightest blessings. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what truly matters. And she had found it all, in the arms of the man who was supposed to be her biggest mistake, but turned out to be her greatest love. So, what did you think of this story full of twists, emotion, and triumph? Rate it from 0 to 10 in the comments. I really want to know your opinion. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like to support True Revenge and subscribe so you don't miss any of the upcoming stories. And now, click on the video appearing on the screen because it's also very emotional, and I'm sure you'll love it. See you there.